Welcome everybody to some bonus content on GoF1.tv. Marlon Stockinger joined us for the San Marino Grand Prix, Imola Grand Prix, whatever it is we're calling it, Debrief, and stuck around after the show. Thanks, Marlon. Of course, you're a Filipino racing hero, well known, of course, for that GP3 victory at Monaco in 2012. But it's your opinions we want to hear now in this extra bonus content that we're doing. And we had a question from Janine Rodriguez, which is about the Mercedes team, and she's asking, I assume it's a she, with them being a little bit behind, what do you think Mercedes have to do to get back onto the front row of the grid again?
Well, it's quite a few things. I think Mercedes being in the position they've been over the last 4 races of this new season, new set of regulations, it's very uncharacteristic. We're not used to it as an audience. We're used to seeing Hamilton constantly fighting for pole or wins, or whatever it has to do with winning a Formula One race. And that's just not the case this year. In fact, Lewis is even behind George Russell in pretty much the World Drivers' Championship, race results, and outright pace. So I think in a way, yes, it's 4 races. We could say it is 4 races, maybe early enough in the season where, there can be a bit of a comeback. We've kind of seen that actually even with McLaren having a horrible start, but, finding some form, scoring points, and now Lando even getting a podium. But I think Mercedes just needs to know that they have the pedigree. They've won so many championships. They've been dominant for literally pretty much a decade almost. And with Lewis obviously at the front, Toto Wolff, and the Mercedes-Benz team putting all that effort. So I think they just have to remember who they are in terms of the pedigree, trust the process, understand that this year could not be the sort of year they've been used to in recent history and in what everyone's just remembered about Formula One so far. And it's going to be a trying time. And really the only pressure they can put is on themselves. They're a bit out of the limelight since they're not fighting for the title. But I think even especially for someone like Lewis Hamilton, now everyone's basically trying to find an excuse of whether, if he was that good. And we all know that Lewis never backs down. He has that literally on the back of his helmet, still we rise, and he's always risen to the occasion throughout his Formula One career. So I think you'd be quite spectacular to really bet against him, especially with someone like Lewis Hamilton behind a Formula One wheel. So
absolutely. And it's a dramatic turnaround, isn't it? 2022 from 2021 to see Mercedes so far back. And in a similar way, and moving on to our next question, it's that the unreliability that the Red Bull team faced in the opening races of the season, 2 out of 3 of the opening races, of course, it's now 2 out of 4 after the Imola Grand Prix. Max had issues with the fuel system, 2 different issues. So I suppose the question that's being asked here is it actually reliability, or is there an underlying issue within the Red Bull racing team that's caused these DNFs? Of course, it's meant reliability, but is there something else? It's a good question. And can Max still defend his world championship? The question there, of course, from the Marlon Stockinger official fan page on Instagram.
Wow. Amazing. That's a great, thank you for the question, obviously. Nice to see my name and there's an actual fan page. I didn't realize this, but it's a great question because I think any of the answers we would have needed from Red Bull actually pretty much happened in the Imola GP. I mean, Max, Checo, the team making calls in terms of strategies. I think even when Red Bull pitted in the same time with Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, Max's pit stop was at least over a second quicker. And you just know that Red Bull, despite, having the early issues, thankfully it was early enough in the season. We can understand, we can forgive, obviously, if there's a new set of regulations for this year, where there's quite a few changes from the power unit to the car designs, the aero, cars being able to follow each other closer. Obviously, with new regs, testing is always imperative. Getting more laps within the new car is really finding the reliability for the vehicle. And sometimes a Formula One winter testing season just isn't enough. And they have to learn these things throughout the season. But it seems that Red Bull, with their experience, their knowledge of winning a championship with this foundation of Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, his raw pace, and Perez being consistent, I think you can pretty much get all the answers of what the results were today. And Red Bull just looked dominant. They looked like they could shoot for the championship again this year. And it's not just a walk in the park for Ferrari, clearly, because they just crumbled in the limelight.
They did. And it's 27 points now between Charles Leclerc leading the championship and Max Verstappen in second after Max's victory at the Emilia Grand Prix. So yes, you're right. He certainly can turn it around. I want you to put yourself now, Marlon, in the shoes. And in fact, it's John, the storyteller, who's asking us to do this. He's a friend of the show, asks us great questions. And here's another one. Put yourselves in the shoes of Mattia Binotto. Who do you choose? Who would you rather have as your second driver? Would it be Carlos Sainz, who's clearly struggling? Maybe it's bad luck. Or somebody punching above his weight like Kevin Magnussen? Who would you choose?
That's very, again, John, great question. I think it's even harder for me to answer because in the 2 years that I did race in World Series, I raced against Carlos, I raced against Kevin Magnussen. Both ended up winning the championships in the 2 years that I raced with them. In the season opener with Carlos, I actually came second in Monza and he ended up winning the race. And I really highly rate Carlos Sainz as a driver. I think for Ferrari, he is a great fit. I think he has the capability of challenging Charles to really keep him sharp as well. We had many points actually during our GoF1 debrief in which we talked about, not always being in the thick of the best drivers and racing against them. And in this case, I think Sainz does bring that pedigree. He's always been a quick driver, and I think he can push him along. Having said that, though, Kevin Magnussen, in the form that he's found and how he's running in Haas, consistent, variable conditions, that's always been a strong trait of Kevin. I've always noticed him to be able to always find form and really shine through variable conditions, wet conditions. And that just speaks to the raw talent of a driver, which I think Kevin really has. In terms of teammates, obviously we saw a lot of clashes between himself and Grosjean, who in wanting to be the number one, knowing that Grosjean was also a massive talent. And we saw a lot of headbutts, a lot of wheel rubbing, which is obviously, racing in F1. But I think it would be a bit more of an issue. Now, whether that's really the case, I mean, we'd really have to see either of them paired up. I can only say with Sainz that if he were to be in a position where he is second to Charles for the championship, I think Sainz can kind of understand and accept that role even as early as now, simply because we understand that every point you fight for in Formula One, every race, it all counts. I mean, we literally went to the last lap, the last race of the season, the last second to know whether we'd have our new world champion, and that was Max Verstappen, and that was last year. So at this point, the mistakes that Sainz is doing, I mean, he might have to make a decision, and whether he does start to think or accept where he can do a support role for Charles might define whether he really is the good pairing and the right teammate for Ferrari, or as a driver for Ferrari in the future. I mean, he has the new contract signing, but I think at the same time, these moments define you in your career, especially when you're given the opportunity. And we know that's a very exclusive opportunity because in Formula One, there's barely 20 seats every year on that grid. So I think that's very, very important to note. And if we put similar experiences of recent history, we've seen Sebastian Vettel, for instance, go down this negative spiral in which ultimately he lost his seat and made way for Carlos Sainz coming in. So whether Carlos repeats this, whether Ferrari is capable of having two drivers without putting too much pressure on one or the other, this will be the year that really defines it. It's been 15 years since we've seen Ferrari win a world championship. I've been waiting. I think all the fans, the tifosi, the Italians, I mean, this weekend would have been exactly that. And they just, they didn't show up to the race today. And I think we're all disappointed. We all love it when we see a Ferrari finally doing what they're supposed to do, what we know they're capable of, having those memories of Schumacher. But it's about time, I think we all want to see it.
And one of the things about Carlos, of course, is he's only 27 years of age. And whereas I think Sergio Perez at age 34, to your point, has taken that number two driver role very happily. He's delighted to have it pick up an occasional win. I'm not sure that Carlos is ready yet to accept that he's a number two. unfortunately, number 4, which is our final question in our bonus content with Marlon Stockinger, comes from, again, the Marlon Stockinger fan page on Instagram. And it's the question I think we all want to know, Marlon, which is, what are your racing plans coming up? Are you going to be going international at all, and when? Or only, not only, but are you racing locally as well? Tell us what you're up to.
Well, obviously with the past couple of years, COVID, I've been based in Asia. And I think COVID, in terms of motorsport for Asia, it was very difficult to participate. I had plans of racing in GT3, at least at the time, Blancpain GT Asia. But that all got pretty much scrapped because of the fact that we're not landlocked the same way Europe is in terms of being able to travel a bit easier and have an abundance of racetracks. Asia is a bit more difficult. We have to fly to the circuits. And a lot of the good circuits were in areas that were deeply affected, like China. You have Shanghai track there. You had obviously Japan, potentially Malaysia, obviously with their circuits. So it was difficult to find the seat. I tried to make the most. I'm always pushing to be fast. And I do still have plans of wanting to compete. I think as a racing driver, you'll forever have that. And I'm sure Matthew, as a competitor and being a racing driver yourself, it's till the end basically with speed. And I would love to compete. I think that's what makes me a racing driver. If that opportunity arises, I'll definitely take it. I'm always looking for it. I'm always trying to keep sharp, whether it's participating in local races here or just being at the track, trying to help local Philippine motorsport. It's really a passion for me. It's something that I love. And even if it's having tested the Formula One car or simply just going around and experiencing people during a Clubman event, which I actually did just recently this weekend, it's still the best of times. And I'm always feeling very lucky to be at the racetrack, to stay close to Formula One, because I think it's a passion that I can share with a lot of people. And it's a passion I think that a lot of people have in the Philippines. And I think globally in recent times, the modern F1, I think everyone loves it. And it's a great time to be a Formula One fan and get into the sport. A young generation is really coming into it, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And they're really liking what they're seeing, Marlon, having you on the GoF1 show today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that you would join me if you were in the audience, and you could a round of applause. Thank you, Marlon, for staying with us for this bonus content on GoF1.tv. And also, I want to say that for those of you that were watching, if you didn't watch yet the race debrief, the full length show with, of course, Marlon, but also Alex Yoong, and we had a special guest, Sean Kelly, the stat man. Do take a look at that. It's 45 minutes long. We really got into the detail of the Emilia Grand Prix. That's all we've got time for right now. Many thanks to you, Marlon Stockinger. Many thanks to you, our viewers, our fans, sending in the questions. Keep them coming, and we'll keep producing shows. Take care.